Number 12. The Aztec Empire, the architecture of the end. Imagine you're a Spanish soldier marching into the heart of Tenochtitlan in 1519. You expect gold, you expect heat. What you don't expect is a wall that breathes with the ghosts of 10,000 dead men. Not a wall of stone, but a towering, rhythmic structure of human bone. Thousands of hollow eyes stare back at you, cemented together with lime into a perfect, terrifying cylinder. The smell is the thick, metallic soup of old copper and rot. You realize this isn't a monument to a war, it's a permanent guest list for the afterlife. For centuries, enlightened historians claimed the Spanish were lying, that they exaggerated the Aztec skull towers to justify their colonial conquest and paint the indigenous people as savages. They were wrong. This isn't a campfire story, it's a forensic fact. In 2015 and 2017, the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Mexico City discovered the Huey-Tzompantli right beneath the city's modern pavement. They found over 650 skulls, including those of women and children, meticulously cemented into a circular tower near the Templo Mayor. As reported by Reuters, archaeologists find a tower of skulls under Mexico City. This discovery proved the scale of ritual gore was exactly as the conquistadors described. The Aztecs weren't just killing for sport. They were running a sophisticated, state-sponsored extraction of life force. They believed that without a constant supply of human blood, the sun itself would stop moving. They transformed the human body into a construction material, turning their capital into a literal house of cards if the cards were made of your neighbor's femurs and lime. The logical explanation is that the Tzompantli was a display of psychological power, a tool to keep vassal states from rebelling. It's hard to start a revolution when you might end up as a brick. But look at the precision of the masonry. Does a culture that builds with bones simply vanish, or does that energy find a new way to manifest? We call it civilization, but for the Aztecs, the nightmare was the only thing keeping the sun in the sky. Number 11. The Assyrian Empire, the flaying artists. A messenger arrives at your city gates. He doesn't bring a treaty, he brings a warning etched in human skin. He tells you that the last king who refused to pay tribute didn't just lose his crown, he lost his epidermis. He describes a city wall that has been wallpapered with the tanned hides of the local nobility. The Assyrians aren't here to rule your people. They are here to harvest the very idea of your resistance, one agonizing, systematic strip of flesh at a time. The Neo-Assyrians were the first true masters of industrial-scale psychological warfare, and we know this because they left us a signed confession. This isn't hyperbole, it's archaeology. Scholars translating cuneiform tablets found in the ruins of Nineveh and Nimrud have documented the explicit boasts of King Ashurnasirpal II. He literally wrote, "I flayed as many nobles as had rebelled against me and draped their skins over the pile." Science has confirmed these weren't just metaphors to scare the neighbors. Relief carvings found in their palaces depict the systematic removal of skin from live prisoners with surgical precision. They didn't just defeat their enemies, they processed them into decorative art. Their entire military machine was fueled by a level of calculated cruelty that made the Romans look like Sunday school teachers. They were eventually erased by a coalition of every neighbor they ever had, a collective violent never again from the ancient world that wiped their cities off the map for centuries until they were rediscovered in the 1800s. The twist is that the Assyrians were also pioneers of library science and advanced postal systems. They were brilliant administrators who happened to believe that skinning people alive was a valid tool of bureaucracy. But here's the zinger. If a civilization this organized and advanced can normalize such industrial-scale horror, what are we currently normalizing in our modern world that will make future archaeologists look at us with the same bone-chilling disgust? Is brutality the inevitable shadow of progress? Number 10. Carthage, the Tophet mystery. The moon is high over the Mediterranean. You see a procession of wealthy parents dressed in their finest robes walking toward a bronze statue of the god Baal-Hammon. In their arms they carry small bundles. There is no crying. That would be a bad omen for the ritual. They place the bundles into the outstretched heated arms of the idol, and the small forms slide into a pit of fire. The parents watch, convinced that this gift is the only thing standing between their city and total destruction. For a long time, modern historians tried to save Carthage's reputation. They argued that Roman accounts of child sacrifice were just war propaganda designed to make the Punic people look like monsters. However, in 2014, a massive study by Oxford University, published in the journal Antiquity, ended the debate. Scientists analyzed the ash and bone fragments from Tophets, sacred burial grounds found in Carthage. They didn't find the remains of sick infants who died of natural causes. Instead, they found that the infants were healthy, mostly only a few weeks old, and killed at a consistent age. The biological data proves it. This was ritual infanticide on a massive, organized scale. The Carthaginians were trading their most precious resource for divine favor. They weren't monsters in their own eyes. They were cold-blooded celestial accountants. They believed the price of maintaining their maritime empire was the literal blood of their own heirs, burned in a sacred furnace of survival. They turned the love of a parent into a geopolitical transaction. The logical explanation is that in an era of high infant mortality, the Carthaginians were trying to gain a sense of control over a chaotic world. But if the Oxford study is right, and they were killing their healthy children to ensure success, it suggests a culture that valued survival over the very things that make survival worthwhile. When Rome finally salted the earth of Carthage, were they destroying a rival or ending a cycle of theological madness? Number 9. The ancestral Puebloans, the man-corn theory. In the high desert of the American Southwest, a peaceful community lives in stunning cliff dwellings. But something changes. The drought lingers too long. The corn stops growing. One night, a group of warriors arrives, but they aren't looking for grain. They have brought large ceramic pots. By morning, the community is gone, and the only thing left in the fire pit are bones that have been cracked open for the marrow and polished smooth by the churning of boiling water. Welcome to the dark side of Chaco Canyon. This isn't a myth, it's a forensic crime scene. For decades, the idea of cannibalism in the Southwest was a cultural taboo. Then came anthropologist Christy Turner. He spent years analyzing human remains from sites like Cowboy Wash and Chaco Canyon. He discovered something he called pot polish. This is a very specific type of abrasion on the ends of human bones that only occurs when they are boiled in a ceramic pot for hours, rubbing against the rough interior as they simmer. In 2000, a study published in the journal Nature even found human myoglobin, a protein found only in muscle tissue inside fossilized human excrement known as coprolite at these sites. This is the ultimate smoking gun. It proves that people were not just killed, they were consumed. The man-corn theory suggests that a period of extreme social collapse turned a sophisticated culture into a predatory one, where humans became a primary food source for a desperate or perhaps terrifyingly calculated elite class that used consumption as a form of total social control. Some scholars argue this cannibalism wasn't about hunger, but about terrorizing neighbors into submission during a resource war. It was a weapon of mass psychological destruction, not a menu. But here's the lingering question. When the environment fails and the grocery stores go dark, how many weeks of civilization do we really have left before the man-corn theory becomes a local reality once again? Are we just 3 missed meals away from the pot? Number 8. The Scythians, the human skin leather. A Scythian rider gallops across the Eurasian steppe. He's a master of the composite bow, and his equipment is impeccable. You notice his quiver. It's made of a pale, strangely fine-grained leather. It's supple, durable, and looks remarkably like the texture of your cousin's forearm. As he wipes his brow, you see he's wearing a napkin made of a similar material. To him, this isn't a horror movie, it's just efficient recycling. He has conquered his enemy twice, once in life and once in the tannery. The Greek historian Herodotus once claimed that the Scythians made clothing and quivers out of the skin of their enemies. For 2,500 years, everyone assumed he was just being a dramatic, xenophobic jerk trying to paint the barbarians in the worst possible light. But in December 2023, science took Herodotus's side.
A study published in PLOS ONE used paleoproteomics, the analysis of ancient proteins, to test 45 leather samples recovered from Scythian burial mounds in modern-day Ukraine. The results were chilling. While most of the leather was from goats or horses, several samples from quivers were confirmed to be human skin. This wasn't a one-off accident, it was a craft. The Scythians were literal headhunters who saw the human body as a versatile raw material. They didn't just erase their enemies from the map, they wore them as accessories. This isn't just dark history, it's forensic confirmation that the Scythians lived in a reality where the line between a person and a piece of equipment was as thin as a layer of dermis. The logical explanation is that this was a form of ritual dominance. If you possess the skin, you possess the soul or the legacy of the defeated. It's the ultimate stay-away sign for any trespassing neighbor. But it makes you wonder, if the Scythians were this comfortable with the macabre, what other fables from Herodotus, like their use of hemp for purification or their golden trophies, are actually cold, hard scientific facts waiting for a lab to prove them right? Number 7. The Site-Ka, the Lovelock Giants. Imagine you are a Paiute warrior in ancient Nevada. Your tribe is locked in a generational war with a nightmare, a race of massive red-haired cannibals known as the Site-Ka. They're too strong to fight head-on, so you trap them in a cave near Lovelock. You pile brush at the entrance and set it ablaze. You listen to the screams of the giants as they are choked by smoke and fire, effectively burning a literal monster out of your history books forever. At least, that's what the stories say. This sounds pure folklore until you look at the 1911 miners' report. 2 guano miners at Lovelock Cave began digging and found something they weren't supposed to: massive skeletons and incredibly complex duck decoys buried deep in the cave. Archaeologist L.L. Loud was brought in, and he confirmed the presence of large remains and incredibly complex duck decoys buried deep in the cave. Local legends insisted these skeletons were 7 to 8 feet tall. Now here is where the tribal trigger happens. Science officially claims the red hair found on the mummies is simply a chemical breakdown of pigmentation caused by the soil over centuries. They say the skeletons were within normal human range. However, the Paiute oral history is adamant. These weren't people, they were something else. Many believers claim the largest bones were whisked away by the Nevada Historical Society to protect the standard narrative of human evolution. We have the cave, we have the ash, and we have the oversized sandals. But the bones themselves, they've conveniently vanished into the archives of history. The skeptical view is that giants are just a human tendency to exaggerate the other to make our victory seem more heroic. But if it was all just a story, why were the artifacts and skeletons handled with such secrecy? Is history a record of what truly happened, or a curated exhibit of what we're allowed to believe? Number 6. The Moche, the blood cups. In the coastal deserts of Peru, a massive crowd gathers below the Pyramid of the Moon. 2 warriors have just finished a ritual duel. The loser isn't killed on the field. Instead, he is led to the top of the temple. A priestess, dressed in exquisite silver, steps forward. She doesn't use a sword, she uses a small, razor-sharp blade to open the man's throat. She catches the fluid in a ceramic goblet and hands it to the Lord, who drinks it while the crowd cheers. For a long time, we thought Moche pottery, which vividly depicts these scenes of throat-cutting and blood-drinking, was just mythology or artistic license. Then, we dug up the Huaca de la Luna. Archaeologists found the skeletons of dozens of young men, and the forensic evidence was a 100% match for the art. Their cervical vertebrae showed clear horizontal cut marks, consistent with expert throat slitting. Furthermore, chemical analysis of the ceramic cups found in these elite tombs tested positive for human blood proteins. This wasn't symbolic, it was a literal blood-drinking culture. The Moche were obsessed with the power of the flow. They believed that by consuming the life force of their elite warriors, they could stave off the devastating El Niño floods that periodically threatened their civilization. They were a society that functioned like a biological pump, moving blood from the commoners to the gods to keep the rains at bay. It was a sophisticated, gruesome feedback loop designed to negotiate with a hostile climate using the only currency they had. The twist is that despite their bloodlust, the Moche were incredible engineers and artists. They built some of the most complex irrigation systems in the world. But perhaps the engineering wasn't enough to calm their fears. When the blood stopped flowing, or the gods stopped listening, the Moche didn't just decline, they vanished into the sand, leaving behind only the cups they used to toast their own destruction. Does every civilization have a price they are willing to pay? Number 5. The Sea Peoples, the Bronze Age Terminators. The year is 1177 BC. The greatest civilizations on Earth, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, the Egyptians, are at the peak of their power. Then, smoke appears on the Mediterranean horizon. A fleet of ships, carrying people no one recognizes, begins to land. They don't just raid for gold, they erase. They burn cities to the ground so thoroughly that they are never rebuilt. Within a single generation, the global economy collapses, writing is forgotten, and the world enters a dark age that lasts 4 centuries. The Sea Peoples are the ultimate archaeological enigma. We know they existed because the Egyptians, who barely survived them, wrote about them in a state of absolute panic. The Amarna letters and the Medinet Habu inscriptions by Ramses III list them by name, the Peleset, the Teker, the Denyen. But the most terrifying evidence is the ash layer. Excavations across the entire Mediterranean, from modern-day Turkey to the Levant, show a distinct, uniform layer of charcoal and destruction dating exactly to this period. It's a horizon of fire. Science has confirmed that this wasn't a natural disaster, it was a systematic, coordinated series of invasions by a technologically advanced seafaring force. They were the Bronze Age Terminators, a multi-ethnic coalition of refugees and warriors who broke the world and then, strangely, disappeared into the very chaos they created. They left us with a 3,000-year-old cold case and a destroyed world that took nearly a millennium to recover its previous level of sophistication. Number 4. Mohenjo-Daro, the vitrified city. Imagine walking through the streets of an ancient city in the Indus Valley. The architecture is perfect. Grid systems, advanced drainage, public baths. But then you look at the floor. The sand has been turned into green glass. You find skeletons lying in the streets, some holding hands, as if death came so fast they didn't even have time to scream. There are no signs of a battle, no sword wounds, just a flash of heat so intense it turned a metropolis into a kiln. This is the tribal trigger point of ancient history. In the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, the Davenport and Vincenti report claimed they found green glass, often called trinitite. This material only forms when sand is heated to at least 1,500 degrees Celsius, temperatures usually associated with a volcanic eruption or a nuclear blast. Furthermore, some early reports from the site claimed that the skeletons found showed radiation levels 50 times higher than the natural background. Skeptics, however, are quick to point out that the glass is likely just discarded slag from ancient pottery kilns, and that the skeletons were just burials that shifted over time. But the mystery persists. The vitrification of the brickwork suggests a heat source that the technology of 2500 BC shouldn't have possessed. Was this an ancient industrial accident, a cosmic airburst, or something much more advanced that history has chosen to forget? The site remains a puzzle where science and ancient astronaut theories collide over a bed of glass. The twist is that the Indus Valley civilization had better plumbing than some modern cities, yet they left behind no records of kings or wars. They were a peaceful utopia until the moment they weren't. Was the green glass a result of their own secret technology, or did something from the sky decide to hit the reset button on a civilization that was getting too smart for its own good? History might be hiding a much hotter truth. Number 3. The Cucuteni-Trypillia, the arson ritual. A culture in Eastern Europe builds a massive, beautiful city of 15,000 people. They live there for 70 years. Then, on a predetermined day, they don't pack their bags for a move. They don't flee an enemy. They simply walk out of their houses, turn around and set every single building on fire. They watch their history turn to ash, and then they walk into the distance to build a new city, knowing they will do the exact same thing to that one in another 70 decades. This isn't a theory. It's a repetitive 3,000-year-long archaeological fact known as burned house syndrome. Using archaeomagnetic dating, scientists analyzed the clay floors of these ancient homes in modern-day Romania and Ukraine. They found that the fires were so hot, reaching over 1,000 degrees Celsius, that they permanently preserved the magnetic alignment of the Earth's poles at that exact moment. This proves the fires were intentional, massive, and synchronized. This wasn't an accident, a lightning strike, or an invasion. It was a ritual. They burned thousands of homes, thousands of times across centuries. They were a civilization that refused to let the past accumulate. They lived in a cycle of creative destruction that is completely alien to our modern desire to preserve everything in a museum. They didn't want a legacy. They wanted a clean slate over and over. They didn't leave behind trash. They left behind a trail of scorched earth that was carefully planned. Science has confirmed this was a cultural choice, not a tragedy. The logical explanation is that burning the houses was a high-stakes form of hygiene to kill parasites and cleanse the site for future use. It was a high-stakes form of hygiene, but the scale suggests something deeper, a psychological commitment to never becoming stagnant. They erased themselves so they could be born again. In a world obsessed with leaving a legacy and digital footprint, is there something we could learn from a culture that chose to leave only ash and light? Number 2, the Maya, the LiDAR scan. For centuries, we pictured the Maya as a scattered group of jungle dwellers living in small city-states governed by stargazing priests. We thought the jungle reclaimed them because they were small and fragile. But in 2018, a plane flew over the Guatemalan canopy equipped with a laser that could see through the trees. When the data came back, the archaeologists didn't see a jungle. They saw a sprawling, interconnected megalopolis that rivaled ancient Rome or modern Los Angeles in its density and scale. This is the big data era of archaeology, and it changed everything we thought we knew. The 2018 National Geographic report on the LiDAR, light detection and ranging scans, revealed over 60,000 previously unknown structures buried under the green. We now know the Maya population wasn't a few million, it was closer to 20 million. This scientific data proves that the Maya didn't vanish because they were weak. They collapsed because they were too successful. They had engineered every square inch of their environment, terracing mountains, draining swamps, and clear-cutting entire forests to feed a massive, hungry population. When a multi-decade drought hit, they had zero margin for error. They had exhausted their soil, their water, and their luck. The LiDAR proves that the Maya were a nightmare civilization, not because of gore, but because of extreme overconsumption. They were a mirror of our own modern world, a society that grew so fast it literally ate its own future before the rain stopped falling. The twist is that the Maya are still here. Millions of people speak the language and hold the traditions today. It wasn't the people who were erased, but the system of unsustainable growth. The LiDAR scans show us the skeleton of a civilization that thought it was too big to fail. If 20 million people can be brought to their knees by a change in the weather, how safe do you really feel in your global city tonight? Number 1. The pre-flood watchers, the Nephilim. Before the first pharaoh, before the first Sumerian tablet, there is a gap in our story. Ancient texts from across the globe, the Book of Enoch, the Sumerian king list, the Genesis accounts, all speak of a time when gods or watchers walked among men. They speak of a corrupted bloodline, a race of hybrids that filled the earth with violence and forbidden knowledge. They speak of a world so broken that the only solution was a total planetary reset, a flood that wouldn't just kill, but would wash the slate clean. While we haven't found a Nephilim femur in a glass case at the Smithsonian, the geological evidence for the mechanism of erasure is now mainstream science. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests that 12,800 years ago, a series of comet fragments struck the North American ice sheet. This triggered a cataclysmic meltwater pulse, a global flood that matches the timing of these ancient legends perfectly. This wasn't a local rainstorm, it was a global reset that erased the archaeological record of the late Pleistocene. This event horizon explains why we find out-of-place artifacts and massive megalithic structures like Göbekli Tepe that seem to appear out of nowhere with no primitive ancestors. The science of the flood confirms that a high-functioning global culture could have been scrubbed from the face of the earth in a matter of weeks, leaving only the ghost stories of the survivors to tell us what they were. We are looking at the scar tissue of a dead world. We aren't the first advanced species here. We're just the ones currently holding the lease. The logical explanation is that these are foundational myths, stories we tell to explain why we don't know our own origins. But the zinger is this. Every culture on Earth has a memory of these ancient onlys who were erased for a good reason. If the Younger Dryas happened once, it can happen again. Are we the new watchers, and is the Earth already preparing its next reset for us? Stay humble, human.
So, there it is. 12 civilizations that the world decided it was better off without, or that simply burned themselves out in a blaze of blood, ash, and overambition. History isn't a straight line of progress. It's a graveyard of experiments that went horribly wrong. And the scariest part? Most of these people thought they were the pinnacle of humanity, right up until the moment the skinning started or the water rose. But I want to know what you think. Is history being hidden from us to keep us from panicking? Or are we just really good at forgetting the things that scare us? Also, what should we dive into next? Do you want the truth about the missing 411 cases? Or are we going back to the deep sea to look at what's hiding under the ice? Drop a comment below. I actually read them, and I'll be picking the next topic based on what you guys are vibing with. If you're the kind of person who always needs to know the real story, then you're in the right place. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you for the next one. Stay curious.